Hello, company, and welcome to Show People, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the UK performing arts industry, covering the latest news and issues, what to see and do, showcasing theatrical talent, and always trying to inform, educate, and entertain. My name is Andrew Keates. I'm a director and your host for today's show. Now, today's guest is a toad, a scoundrel, and a hound. He's appeared in musicals such as Wind in the Willows and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, plays such as One Man, Two Guvnors, What the Butler Saw, and Don Quixote for the RSC. He's a presenter, comedian, actor, and polymath, and one of my favourite human beings. Please welcome the indomitable Mr. Rufus Hound.
Oh, hooray! Oh, when's he getting here? I love that bloke. Woohoo!
Coming up on today's show, what is the value of the BBC and the high-paid performers that work for it? Is it all part of the system? I'll be howling my theatrical tips of what to see this February 2018. On the platform, we have music from Rob Winlow's Austin the Musical, which is currently on tour. And of course, I'll be interviewing Rufus Hound, all about his life, career, and setting in some infamous Show People challenges too. You're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates and Rufus Hound.
I just think it's a shame people couldn't see the high-energy dance routine that I was doing to that.
Or the 4 showgirls that I can currently see in
That's
there.
it. Thank you, ladies.
You can go.
You can go now. We've
That's
raised
right.
all that money for Great Ormond Street.
So what have you been up to? Obviously, you've just had, Christmas and New Year. What's been your New Year's resolutions? What have you been doing on these miserable days of January?
Oh, the same as everyone else, really. You overindulge over Christmas. You promise yourself that, no, come on, we'll get to January and all this is going to change. I hurt the top of my foot at the beginning of January.
Why? How?
Well, the God's honest truth is I was on holiday.
Yeah.
Because I'm very successful and very wealthy and very jazzy. Or that because I was working all summer, I didn't have a holiday with my kids. So the whole thing was like, well, I finish working when you go back to school, so we'll do Christmas and then we'll have a week somewhere and we'll really make the most of it. So it was our sort of family holiday. And we went to the Canary Islands, we went to Lanzarote.
Beautiful.
And it was 10 degrees hotter than it was meant to be. And we were on the beach. It's like January the 1st. Everyone's just in, beach wear. It was a total joy. The sea was so warm you couldn't not swim in it. And I ran into the sea in this sandy beach and then just totally smacked the top of my foot and something got in it and it's been sore ever since. But what it allowed me to do is with the top of my foot hurting from when we got back on like the 3rd of January or whatever, to just be able to say, oh, well, I can't go for a run. And now we're, approaching the latter 3rd of January and it's like, well, maybe I'm over that already.
I had that horrifying realization because I have both my other half's family to go to and my own families to go to. We do this crazy thing where we have faux Christmas.
Lovely.
Which is where we pretend it's Christmas about a week before, which we spend with whatever family. And then we go to the other family and have real Christmas. But this year, we also had my father-in-law's 60th birthday.
Oh, nice.
So it's been about 3 weeks of celebrating with relatives, and after a while, you find yourself going, oh, I can only put up with the casual racism so much for so long.
I know, I love these people, but that doesn't mean I need to spend any time with them.
But the problem is what with all of the food from Christmas and the 60th, me and my other half have lived on basically an entire buffet every day for about a month. And also getting all these lovely new clothes, trying to put them on and going, well, it usually fits. I can't have put on too much. I took a picture of me the other day with Bill Deemer and was like, you've got 2 chins now, kids. Maybe I just like to think that by investing in a gym membership, that somehow that's going to help.
Yeah.
So by spending that £50 a month, somehow I'm going to lose weight.
Yeah.
But you never do. So yes, I'm wearing black for a very... In fact, you're wearing black as well. We're both wearing black for a very obvious reason.
Very slimming. It's like all the books I buy off Amazon. That's basically the same as reading them, isn't it?
Well, I must read that Sartre book. Come on, I've bought it. It looks great on the shelf.
That's it, yeah.
Now, before we dive into your back catalogue and your life, I want to start off, just so listeners know, just some of the extraordinary things you've done with a show People Challenge. Rufus Hound, I have a copy of your CV in front of me. I would like you, within 60 seconds, to try and remember every single credit that you have ever done.
God.
It's going to be great fun.
It's not.
Rufus Hound, your show...
How long does this game take?
60 seconds.
Okay, well then there you go, podcast listener. That's how long you have to fast forward to get to the end of this.
Rufus, your Show People Challenge begins now.
Well, I'll start with all the theatre. So that was Utopia at the Soho Theatre, One Man, Two Guvnors on tour and at the Haymarket. Then Neville's Island.
Yes.
Don't You Rock the Scoundrels. Wars of the Roses, Kingston. Don Quixote for the RSC. Wind in the Willows. What the Butler Saw for Leicester. And then on TV, panel showy things like Celebrity Juice, The Extra Factor, all of that old nonsense. Radio, My Teenage Diary.
Yes.
Various standing in for people on entertainment shows and what have you.
Think about being a monk.
Well, then I was going to go, that's radio, see, then you go audiobook.
You are many things but empirical.
Yeah, and I've been the monk on various Doctor Who audio adventures for Big Finish. Not least of which was their short trip, how to...
Very good.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, the most important thing I want to ask you about, of course, is Hole in the Wall. That's
Bring on the wall!
Tell me about that as an esteemed actor and comedian. The day you turn up for I'm doing Hole in the Wall. Is there a part of you that dies or a part of you that goes,
oh no,
I fucking love that wall?
No, that was proper fun.
Was it?
Yeah, like oh God, how self-indulgent and old and idiotic do I want to sound? There is a point in your career where you're just making it, and you're making it up as you go along, and it's very good fun. Mm-hmm. And so I'd been doing stand-up. Stand-up was all I ever thought I really would do. Then suddenly there's odd, sniffs of TV, and then that leads to, things, and then you build a bit of a profile, and you end up with one thing and another. At the point I did Hole in the Wall, I was still very much of the view that any minute now, this will all stop and I'll go back to doing stand-up.
Claire's Accessories.
Yeah.
We'll get into that
later. Yeah. And so when they said there's a bunch of money to put on a silver jumpsuit and bend yourself through a hole in the wall, hosted by Anton Dubek, who I know a bit and really rather like, and it just seemed like it would be incredibly good fun.
And what's your favourite panel shows to do? Because when I think of you, obviously I know you as an actor, and then there's all this other stuff, like lots of friends that I know. What are the panel shows that you genuinely enjoy doing? Because I like I said to you before we started, I love hearing you on No Such Thing as a Fish podcast and QI, which seems totally up your street.
Yeah.
What are the other ones that you really enjoy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because there's this sort of Premier League of panel show.
Right.
So that used to be Never Mind the Buzzcocks.
Sure.
Have I Got News for You? QI and 8 out of 10 Cats. That was sort of each channel's, that's the big one. And then they were becoming so successful that there were a whole raft of others that suddenly came up. And of that top tier, I did Buzzcocks, and that went well, and they had me back on that. And that would definitely be on my list of the favourites to do. I was on an episode hosted by Terry Wogan.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and just to spend time with Terry Wogan was really great.
Wogan doing Buzzcocks.
Yeah, and the whole thing was he had this sort of easy listening compilation album out, and all he was doing was plugging that, and in front of Phil Jupiters and Noel Fielding, and all, and I forget who was on it now, Imelda May, and like some cooler people.
This is Bill Deemer, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates.
Well, it's now time for Rufus and I to get on our soapboxes and discuss an industry issue. And today, Rufus and I are going to be talking about the value of the BBC, the fact that it is funded with taxpayers' money, and the hundreds of thousands of pounds that various presenters and actors are getting for their shows.
Maybe this is different for young people listening to this, but when I was growing up, somebody on Heidi High, you thought, oh, well, they're a millionaire.
Mm.
You know, because there's 4 channels, they've got a small part in a regular sitcom, you know, they're probably getting tens of thousands of pounds an episode, and all the repeat fees come in. Well, what's changed in television? All of that additional choice that we all have has devalued, you know, what people are prepared to pay anybody to do anything on television. So don't get me wrong, your Ant and Dex, when you hear about them and they've got all these millions coming in from ITV, well played. You know,
Yes.
Graham Norton, he's the tent pole around which most of BBC Entertainment is now built, between him and Claudia. Like, absolutely right. There are literally, you know, maybe 10 people on television, 20 at a push, that are earning that kind of money.
Adam Woodyatt is one of them. I don't know if you saw the BBC salaries when they came out.
Oh, right.
Adam Woodyatt is one of the highest paid actors.
But this only proves my point, right?
I'm not disagreeing.
Because he was on EastEnders from episode 1.
Mm.
So what was the contract he signed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It was when there was money in television, because there were only 4 channels at the time EastEnders started. Every year that he goes back to negotiate his contract, they're not going to say, oh, by the way, there's been a massive shift in what we pay people. So he'd just be like, well, I'm off.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we need that. You know,
We need Ian Beale. He's worth the money, guys.
Well, I know it sounds daft, but, you know, Ian Beale on EastEnders is the same as Ken Barlow on Coronation Street.
Is he?
Well, he is, because there is a totemic thing about those characters, you know, with the same as, you know, Madge Ramsey or even Harold Bishop, you know, is... I know that's not quite the same thing, because Harold wasn't in it from the very beginning. But or the Robinsons, or
you're listening to the Neighbours podcast.
Yeah. But there is a thing in that episodic television and the audience that it's for, that they need characters who, when the audience gets to a point where they go, I don't think I want to watch this anymore. If 2 years later they turn it on and they don't recognise anybody in it, they feel that the whole thing's moved past them.
I had never even considered that. So just genuine familiar faces.
A few familiar faces.
That's exactly the same as the other actor was, and it's so awful, but I bet nobody knows this actor's real name. But if I say Charlie from Casualty...
Yeah.
He's another one. He's another one that was in that huge, you know... and friends who work for ITV were pissing themselves when all the BBC wages came out.
Yeah.
Because they were going, God, people are going mad over the BBC. We know it's public money and it's wrong.
Yeah.
But they would be killing themselves if they knew just what we're getting paid.
Yeah.
Thanks to it being an independent network.
Yeah, and that's, you know... this. I don't want to get too down this alley, because it's easy to reduce everything to this kind of idea. But there is a way of seeing the world, which is, we are all born onto it at the same point in time, and so your claim over more of it than I have is nonsense. We're all just here by chance. Our ancestors survived to the point that they could reproduce. That cycle continued to bring us here and now. So why is your claim over this bit of it better than my claim over any of it? You were lucky, I was less lucky, so why don't we even that up? That would be the simplest version of a kind of fair and equitable society. Now, anybody hearing that goes, this bloke's a rampant communist. You can't do that. And I can understand why that is in many ways a kind of troubling philosophy. But the more that you say, obviously you can't do it that way, the less likely you are to examine the other ways in which you can do it, because you go, well, you can't do it that way, so this way must be the way that you do it. You go,
especially if you're benefiting. Yeah.
What about the 3,000 other ways? No, we talked about a couple of them and we decided none of them worked, you know. So it's sort of that. It's that the reason ITV doesn't have to do it is because it's not public money. Oh, if people knew what we were paying people, we'd really be in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, it's fine. It's absolutely fine that you don't have to reveal that, because you are the right side of the way in which we talk about how we fund art.
Yeah.
And your side has always been fully commercial, so as long as you are making money and self-supporting and paying shareholders, you are winning. We will never hold you to account.
No.
There is another way of seeing it, and, you know, I've worked for ITV. I would be very happy to work for ITV again. This isn't me banging my big moral drum, but I just mean, if you look at the way in which the BBC contorts itself, if it could, it would reduce itself to beyond the point of its own atoms. That it's so pressured to try and get so much of this stuff right.
It's literally a black hole.
Yeah, what's it called?
W1A.
W1A. My wife used to work for the BBC and has gone back, intermittently. A big part of why she loved working there was the other people that she worked with and the teams that she worked with. And they all are either still there or go back from time to time. And the number of them now who actually do go back is getting fewer and fewer and fewer.
And going to the likes of ITV
and just going and doing anything else, because it's next to impossible to just turn up like a normal person and go, what is it we're making? Oh, lovely. Well, it might be a bit rough around the edges, but we'll throw it together. The forms, was it environmentally sustainable? Was it full BAME representation? Don't get me wrong. No problem with any of those ideas, and it's right that there is time and effort spent on that. But what the BBC doesn't get is the benefit of the doubt. No. Where if it gets it wrong, it's not just, well, look, we had 10 normal human beings who were working on a thing. They really tried their best. They very, very genuinely tried their best. And if it wasn't perfect, okay, it wasn't perfect, but we'll try and get it better next time. Instead, what they have to have is 2,000 people working on something that could have been made by 10 people. The actual end product is less important than whether or not all the boxes got ticked along the way. And when you hold an organisation to account to that degree, and how much are you paying people? And Ant and Dec, there is no woman on television getting wage parity with Ant and Dec.
No.
But that's got nothing to do with the patriarchy. That's got everything to do with how economics works. For as long as Ant and Dec on a TV show brings you 10 million viewers, ITV will pay them to be on their channel because that's going to get us 20 million eyeballs, and those 20 million eyeballs we can put advertising in front of and make money from. Those are the cold hard facts. Any woman in the world who could bring them 12 million eyeballs, 20, more viewers would be paid more than Ant and Dec. They don't give a crap. They're not trying to push any kind of philosophical or moral agenda. Their bottom line is their bottom line. To wit, I think if you watch ITV daytime shows, you might not want to hold ITV to account of who they're paying and how they're paying, but you, I think, can say, what are you selling? What are you making? Because it feels to me that the Jeremy Kyle show and shows like it, but specifically the Jeremy Kyle show, is very specifically selling an agenda to an audience that says, these people whose circumstances we're going to tell you very, very little about are here to be judged by you as to whether or not they are valuable as human beings, as souls.
Yeah. It is horrendous.
So, all right, we can completely justify everything ITV does because they take no public money, so they're free to make what they want to make.
Yeah.
Well, no, they are free to work out how they can get as many people watching the show as possible. And it turns out some people like watching car crashes. Some people like watching open heart surgery with no anaesthetic. Some people like
In fact,
watching...
I'm checking your CV. You did that one, didn't you?
Yeah. Dale Winton hosted an absolute joy. It's the BBC... The problem with the whole world, as I see it, largely comes down to the Persigian philosophy of quality.
Yeah.
In this world, if we can quantify something, if we can measure it, then we feel safe in saying it was good or bad, or it had value or it didn't. And if we can't measure it, then we don't know what to do. We're terrified of being able to stand up and go, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's, what's the difference between art and pornography? Well, I know when I see it.
Yeah.
and
I don't know. Have you seen Proudlock? I still can't quite work out.
But, that idea gets laughed at. I know when I see it. But we kind of all do, right?
Yeah.
And it's, they're probably 3,000 sentences and ideas that I've started in answering that question and finished almost none of them.
No, but it's an interesting discussion because I think it comes down to, look, it's... I saw on Facebook one of these inspirational memes, which usually make me want to sort of vomit onto myself. But it was a really good inspirational meme. The most dangerous phrase in the world is, we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's right, what you're saying. What you're saying is there are so many things, it's just working, so let's just not worry about it. And I think the extremes of ITV are terrible, because I think there are some people that are just not worth that amount of money. And there's enough talent out there that would do it for maybe 2% of what these people are getting.
Sure, but I think then what you're doing is defining the worth of those things by the value of or you're defining the value by the worth of the individual, or by the economic worth of the transaction. And what I'm saying is, get totally away from the idea of the money. They are all worth what they are being paid, right? That is unquestionable. Everybody on that channel is worth what they are paid, simply because if they weren't, they would not being paid it. You might not like the system that defines their worth as being what it is, but that system is the one that exists, and it has defined their worth as being what they are paid. So you cannot argue with that. You might say, I wish it were the case that Piers Morgan wasn't getting paid what Piers Morgan was getting paid, because I don't like Piers Morgan.
No, I really don't like Piers Morgan.
And you'd be right to, but he's delivering the thing that the people paying him need him to deliver, and therefore the value that he has to them can be defined economically as whatever it is they're paying Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
So you can't argue with that. The problem is that you're then asking the BBC to be, because it's public money, to be held to a whole different set of standards that are so specific and so narrowly, so broad in scope and so narrow in each definition of which piece of that scope you're looking at, that the whole thing becomes basically unworkable. And therefore we will, if the BBC continues to exist, it will not be the thing that I would imagine. I can't speak for you and say you love the BBC.
I do love the BBC.
But I grew up, in love with the BBC. The BBC gave me Alan Partridge and The Day to Day and where'd you even begin? Blackadder, Fawlty Towers, all of the comedy that I love, Fist of Fun, the Office. The reason I pause is, exactly. Amongst so many other things, Children's BBC going live, and Live and Kicking. The reason I can't keep going with this list is that that's all we'll talk about for the next hour, is me just listing things that I grew up in love with on the BBC. And when you, got a bit older, or as I got a bit older, and heard interviews with people who worked for the BBC and how they'd gone about making what they made, it just sounded like the greatest place on earth.
Didn't it? Television Centre, the amount of times you would look at it with the little white balls out the front, and you just thought, that's the home of television.
Yeah, that's where the good stuff. That's where they hide the good stuff.
There are Daleks literally in every corridor, And it was always, and you'd also get like Live and Kicking is such a good example, because they would obviously just piss around in the corridors. So you would see poor work experience people with clipboards just seeing Zoe Ball and John Barrowman collapsing into a corridor, and you thought, well, that's what every day's like at the BBC.
Yeah,
and now you see, like you said, W1A with people in these glass goldfish bowls desperately trying to work out, how to book a room. And you go, gosh, is that... In fact, well, you've worked at the BBC, I've been there for interviews, and you go in and there's some very grey, miserable people. There are no Mr. Blobbies bouncing up and down. There is no Daleks in corridors. It's just some very grey people worried about a lot of forms.
Yeah.
How sad.
Well, I think it is partly that. I think what it actually tends to be, in truth, is a lot of young people who are prepared to work at 19,000 miles an hour for 23 hours a day, because they know, if I just get through this bit, then it gets better. And then they get to the next bit and they go, well, I thought it would get better. It must be after this, I was a researcher, now I'm an AP. So it's once I get past AP, once I become a producer, then it's going to get good. Yeah. Then they become a producer and they're like, okay, well, no, but it'll still be fine. And then, by that point, most of them leave to form their own production companies, where they believe, oh, well, if I run my own production company, then I won't be beholden to the kind of bullshit that I've been dealing with for the last 20 years, then I'll be winning. And then what they realise is, oh no, you still then have to sell that idea to a channel and make your show with the person from the channel looking over your shoulder going, I just worry that it's a bit taupe.
Yeah.
What do you mean a bit taupe? Well, I just feel, when I think about this show, I think of the colour taupe, and I think at the moment we're in more of a sort of turquoise phase.
Yeah, defo. For sure.
Yeah, and
Totes.
it's. I think look, I could be completely wrong about this, and with everything I say, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I can tell you what appears to be true to me is when you look at places like Netflix, the reason that they have rinsed it in terms of their output is, I don't know if this is still the case, but it certainly used to be when you heard people talking about making stuff for Netflix, you went in, you pitched, you told them how much it was going to cost, you had some pre-production meetings with them in which they discussed tone and whatever, but on the whole, they employed auteurs and waited for the product to arrive and put it out. And so everybody wanted to work, all the brilliant people wanted to work for them because it's like, of course I want as few people as possible fucking telling me what to do and pushing me around and then insisting bits are cut out and chopped and whatever. Of course that's how I want to work. So I think in a funny kind of a way, you know, not to be too conspiracy minded about it, but it is definitely the case that for a long time in this country, the right wing and especially the right wing media owners have sought at pretty much every turn to undermine the BBC to the best of their ability. And it feels to me that by making such a big fuss about wage parity, which is a huge deal and should be the case, but they make a big deal about it on the BBC, but when was the last time you heard them talking about whether there was wage parity on Channel 5? You know, it's all part of the how can we force the BBC to have to justify itself and how do we undermine it? How do we make working there less and less bearable? It's not like there's some big coup. You can't go to anyone's house and there's a master plan on the wall and it says, right, and then we're going to kick off about wages. But it's just, this seems like another thing we could throw at them that they'll have to defend themselves against.
I think the really interesting thing is, of course, we're going to love all of those things on the BBC when we were kids or young people, because you spend the rest of your adult life looking back going, I want shows that were really special and written for me. Yeah. And indeed, you know, friends of mine who, I say friends, opinionated people who happen to be connected with me on Facebook, you know, the outcry that happened when there was going to be a female doctor. And it's a similar thing, I suppose, down the lines of what you were saying, which is the reason they were so pissed off that, you know, Jodie Whittaker was going to be the first female Doctor was because, do you know what, guys? They're not making Doctor Who for you anymore. And it's
same
not
with Star
your
Wars.
Show. It's exactly the same as Star Wars. It's not like it was, you know, it's just lost all its charm. No, it has not lost its charm.
Luke Skywalker doesn't exist in the exact way that he existed 40 years ago.
Damn you, Mark Hamill.
Damn you, time!
Like, it is, and I understand the gripes, but, you know, what was it I watched? This will give away a bit more of my homosexuality. I had on...
Sure, because regular listeners to this podcast have had no idea up until now.
Not at all. I say my little black polo. But yeah, no, I had on, in the background, The Little Mermaid. Of course I did. And it's amazing. It doesn't look right. And the reason it doesn't look right is my memories of The Little Mermaid is the most colourful, vibrant, extraordinary cartoon ever. Yeah. And you watch it, and they're all vegetable colours. Now, of course, that film hasn't changed. Yeah. It hasn't, you know, suddenly got duller. My eyesight hasn't changed. Just my memory of The Little Mermaid is the most incredible, colourful world. And you look back at it now, and it's not the same. Same as The Land Before Time. The Land Before Time, if you'd asked me up until about the age of 14, I would have said, was the greatest film ever made. My opinion's changed since. But again, you look at it and you go, this is shit. Yeah. Yet my memory of that film is perfect. You know, and it's...
Let me tell you about a comedy masterpiece.
Go on.
Spaceballs.
Oh, it's Rick Moranis, one of Rick Moranis' greatest films ever made.
When was the last time you watched it?
Probably about a year ago.
Oh, right. I watched it a year ago and went, what is this shit?
Smoke if you got him.
This is terrible from the beginning to the end. This is the worst kind of like just debased, pointless, grubby.
Look, there is some really quite misogynistic bits in it, which are really, really awkward. But then there are some very funny things like Pizza the Hut.
But even that. I mean, like, when I saw that when I was 12, I remember, pizza, I get that. Yeah. And now I'm like, all right, so where's that joke going? Oh, literally, no, that's as far as it was. It was that the character was called Pizza the Hut.
It's about our fondness for the stuff that was there when we were lonely and we were kids and we were watching things. And as we've grown older, of course, they've stayed the same. We've changed.
Yeah, but right, I completely agree with you. And actually, if you wanted to extend this even further, I think you can talk about Brexit, right?
No.
No. Yeah, sure. Why not be that podcast? However,
You're listening to the Brexit podcast with Rufus Hound.
But there is an idea that old people have that things used to be better.
They were never better. What, being bombed, it was great.
Yeah, well, that would make them old. But I just mean people sort of, 55 plus. And of course life was better 40 years ago. Of course it was. For you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you were teenagers, you were in the prime of your life, the world was exciting. You know, that is what the world was. So this thing that you're voting that we've got to get back to is not a thing that ever actually existed. It is a fluid point in time that you have carried with you that merely represents a time in your life before everything hurt.
Yeah.
And your pension was worth nothing. And... Divorce
too.
Yeah, exactly. And you couldn't play golf anymore, and your children hated you. Yeah, let's get back to before all of that shit happened.
Before I was a twat. Yeah. And I was thin. And you're totally right.
And before I was irrelevant, largely. I'll show you how bloody irrelevant I am. It's that. You look at the swing on Brexit, it was old people said, let's get back to something, and young people saying, no, we want to push forward with something. And so... yes, you can look back at Going Live and The Day Today and Alan Partridge and say, weren't they amazing shows? And of course I remember them as being amazing because I was a teenager when I watched them. The difference I would say is I am also talking about Fawlty Towers. Well, I didn't watch Fawlty Towers when I was growing up because it wasn't on. I only really watched those because my dad bought them on video at some point in the mid-'80s, and it was like, oh my God, this is great. Dad's Army. These are the shows that existed that had nothing to do with my youth per se, that I still watch and think these are amazing shows that got made. These are really exceptional pieces of art. That is different. Sorry. And therefore, the organisation that was created that allowed these things and allowed these things to be made and fostered their creation and nurtured them into being seen by as many people as possible, I don't think that a respect for the system that brought those things into being and looking back at that system fondly is the same as the nostalgia that you have for the things themselves.
And you're right as well. This push and pull. You look at all of the arguments. Look at Trump. We're going to make America great again.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Make it great again?
Well, have you seen any of the YouTube clips where guys from the Daily Show were going to Trump rallies and go, "Make America great again"? And all the Trump guys go, "Yeah, just be specific. When was that?"
Yeah.
And these guys are like, well, a lot has changed in this country. He's like, yeah, so let's make it great again. So when was it great?
Specifically.
And they're like, well, we got a lot of problems with Mexicans. Yeah, totally get that. Yeah. So when was it great? Was it great when we had slaves? Was that what the period that were... Well, no one's saying that. No, okay. So it was after that point, of course...
I think Charlton Heston was on screen at the time. Yeah.
That's it. And none of those people could actually define this mythic... greatness, because it's a feeling that they have that is associated with their own youth rather than any definable actual time. The thing that I'm trying to do as I walk around the world is avoid that thing of, but there are people who are just like this, right? Because what I think I have realised, and not on my own, reading and talking to people, is we're all like that. Right? Those people who are, in inverted commas, like that are only like that because the circumstances they found themselves in, they developed their own, coping strategy. And so they're like, throw out negative so that nobody realises how vulnerable I am.
Yeah.
Well, you would be too if you'd been through the shit they went through.
Yeah.
So it's, on a practical level, you can sort of paint people as, some people are just like that. No, the difference is this. If you accept that some people aren't like that, but they respond like that because the world in which we live has made them like that, then I think you can begin to ask slightly more proactive and useful questions like, so what do we do to change the world for the better so that we make less people behave in that terrible way? And the more you realise that, you are Hitler, you are Mother Teresa, you are Donald Trump, you are Anita Roddick.
Crikey. Didn't expect that one.
You are all those people, but for your choices. There are no people born who are just better or gooderer.
Oh, I think there might be a couple of gooderer people.
No,
but
they have become gooderer because of the way in which they grew up and the way in which life treated them and the lucky breaks or even the hardships that they had to overcome.
Everything boils down to what you're saying. It is that push and pull, isn't it? And I think the most fascinating thing that you've said, which really, really rings true, and I hadn't considered it like this, is just this I'm frustrated because I'm not young and cool and people are interested in me anymore. And it's almost I hate to boil the world down to one problem, but it's almost, why don't I get attention anymore?
Yeah.
And now what with Twitter and everything else, all of life's gripes, even this podcast, us talking like we're doing now, we're feeding into the same system, which is, look at me, I've got an opinion. Why won't anyone listen to me anymore?
Yeah, we are part of the deafening wall.
Yeah.
And if as long as the wall remains deafening, your ability to stop and think about anything, is reduced to zero. You're just bombarded with opinion. And now this bloody thing is happening. Oh, now these people did this thing. Oh, right. Oh, thank God I finished being cross about that. But now there's other things. Oh, God.
I did it the other day. My other half looked at me and said, "You're ridiculous." And I said, "Why am I ridiculous?" I ordered a KFC from Deliveroo, and there weren't 2 chicken wings that I specifically spent £1.99 on.
Yeah.
So, of course, I got out my pathetic little phone and I sent out a pathetic little tweet just because, for some reason, I thought my followers might be able to shame that multi-million pound Deliveroo. And yes, they gave me a refund for £1.50, and that just made me feel even sadder because I just held up a mirror to myself and thought, Andrew, what have you become? Most people would go, oh, shame there's no chicken wings. But no, you broadcast it to 14,000 people on Twitter to get £1.50, you sad bastard. Now, bring on the wall.
I just like the idea that Colonel Sanders is stood at a cocktail party and his phone suddenly vibrates to this point.
Shit, Andrew Keates.
Better just see what... Oh, my God. Guys, stop what you're doing. Keates, he's not had his wings.
Did you not see what he was like with those racial issues? He does protest, for God's sake. Well, listeners, what do you think? We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget, you can tweet the show at ShowPeopleUK using hashtag ShowPeoplePodcast, or join the Show People Podcast Listeners Forum at facebook.com/ShowPeoplePodcast. Give the page a like and join in the conversation. If we don't talk about these things, then we can't change them.
This is Kumiko Mendel, Artistic Director of Yellow Earth Theatre. You are listening to the Show People Podcast with Andrew Keates.
So, Rufus, let's start at the very beginning.
It's a very good place to start.
We can do the whole song.
Let's not.
Let's leave that for later. So, just so people who don't know your background, where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Romford in Essex. We moved from there to, where did we move to? Woking in Surrey. Went to a school called Hoe Bridge, which was an amazing school, private school, but a day school. There were a few boarders, but it was really a day school. And that kind of really fostered, great things. Brilliant musicians came out of there, and people who went on to become solicitors and all the sorts of good, honest, and respectable middle-class professions. The good, honest middle-class people who were sending their kids there wanted their children to become. From there, I then went to a school called Frensham Heights, which was a progressive school. It was co-educational, no uniform. You called the teachers by their first name, no religious education, and quite a big emphasis on art and arts, where I was taught by a man called David Proudlock, who was the drama school teacher. And when the money ran out in our family after my dad's carefully thought through financial plans turned out to be less carefully thought through and less viable, it was David Proudlock who approached the school and said, I think we should keep this kid here because I think he will add to our reputation of
really-
being able to do drama.
I'm really glad you brought him up because we did a reading together at the Criterion Theatre, and there was one night where I think we had a few glasses of wine.
Seems unlikely.
Never. And you said, I've got this amazing dinner coming up. I'm going to go and meet this guy called David Proudlock, who's my drama school teacher. I said, oh, are you close? And you went, I think of him now as a sort of father figure.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. I know I'm asking you to repeat something you said to me in a social event, but I mean, it was such an amazing story that you come to that realization.
Yeah, it's I mean, this is definitely oversharing, but for what it's worth, I'll share it. When everything started to go a bit south in our family because there was no money, we'd lived in this big house. My dad had a couple of cars, and I would like to point out, it wasn't like he was a asset stripper or a banker. He was just an accountant for a very successful firm of lawyers. But anyway, that came to a close. So suddenly the country club membership, the cars get sold, the house is sold. We moved to somewhere smaller, and so that kind of tumult of, hey, I know what my life is, moving to, literally mapping onto, 13th birthday. Hi, I'm ready for some teenage angst. Yeah. Lovely. Here's everything you thought you know what your life was, and we're just going to throw that in the bin now and turn it all upside down. And the drama teacher, David Proudlock, it would be very easy to tell you that he was this lovable guy. And, everything I was going through, he'd sort of sit me down, put an arm around me and, listen and all of that. Just wasn't what he was like. What he gave me instead was, all this showing off that you like to do.
Oh, yeah.
Well, fuck off. Right? It's work. And unless you are prepared to work at this and take it seriously and work hard, then this is just noise and I have no time or respect for it.
I love him. He's a man after my own heart.
Yeah. But once I'd showed I was prepared to do the work, then he was a lot more like, right, well, now read this.
Yeah.
Now here's another play. What, you wanna for your GCSE drama, you want to do polished improvisation as part of the thread that you're doing? Okay, well, what does that set look like? Okay, lovely. You've got the drawings. Well, that's going to require 3 flats painted. Who do you think is going to paint those?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Well, there are some paints. I'll bring you out the flats, and then you've got the keys to the building for 2 days.
Amazing.
And what he did was he facilitated and challenged, and then would, after the event, say, you did really well there. But it wasn't moment by moment, come on, you can do this. No one's a bigger fan of you than I am.
Yeah.
And I think it was just giving me and another friend of mine this sort of work ethic when it came to theatre that really, for whatever reason, the way he did it, the way he presented it to us, I couldn't tell you exactly what, but he definitely championed me without it being overly emotional, and he facilitated my ideas coming to life. And he educated me in other people who had done it way better than I had done it. So, read quite a lot of John Godber and Willie Russell,
right.
and Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And at the end of all of that process, I got an A star for drama, and he was just like, well done.
Yeah.
So, since then, I left school, went to a different college that was not that environment at all. So for my, A-level, for my A-level, the next school, I turned up at my theatre studies, department, and within 2 weeks, they'd asked us to hand in an essay that had to be something. I mean, I'm making these numbers up, but I think it had to be 500 words long about a specific part of, I think it was A Doll's House by Ibsen.
Yeah.
And I handed in a 3,500 word essay.
Thesis
on why thematically the play didn't work for me, and that what I thought it was setting out to accomplish and the reverence that play is given doesn't actually translate when you look at who was saying what and the actions taken, by the characters and all of this.
Really interesting.
And I handed it in and I got it back, and my drama teacher at the time looked me in the eye and went, if you keep that up over 2 years, you're leaving here with a top grade. And I went, oh, you mean I can do this? She went, if that was a piece of A-level coursework, now that we were handing it at the end of this, that would be an A for your A-level coursework. I went, so you mean I can do it? She went, you can do it. And I went, oh, good. Well, then I don't have to prove that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally stopped.
Yeah.
Stopped working, was really only interested in, by this point, you're 17, was only really interested in trying to get into pubs and, girls' pants, really.
I wonder, though, with today's education, whether people like, David Proudlock would actually be encouraged to teach that way anymore.
No, he wasn't then. Yeah. I mean, the lovely thing about that dinner that I had with him is he basically revealed to me that his entire career as a drama teacher has been spent basically being hated by one faculty and the next. But I mean, I know some of the kids who have been taught by him, because I've talked about him before, and various people have said, and it's always one of two things. They either say, oh my God, that man changed my life. What he inspired in me and my peers, I could never thank him enough for.
Yeah.
Or they say, the worst teacher I ever had. I couldn't stand that guy.
And when was the first time you discovered theatre? When was the first time that you saw something that made you go, I want to do that?
Television, That's the God's honest truth, is that I was raised on the Muppet Show. And the Muppet Show is a story about colourful characters who are putting on a show,
With a song that does explain how they do that.
Yeah,
yes.
That's it, right? So I really, whenever I've thought about this, I sort of, go back to, but what was it that, the idea of actually being on a stage, where did that come from?
That's what I want to know.
Right? And it is the Muppet Show, because I just think that must be where that thing kind of climbed into my head, was the people I love more than anything else in the world, outside of my family, are Kermit and Fozzie and Gonzo and Scooter, and their whole lives are built around putting this show on. The curtain's going to come up and there are people up in the boxes and a big audience, people filling the theatre.
It's time to face the music.
And they've got to get out there, they've got to put it on. And I think, probably fairly classically, I'm the older brother, but not by much. So the baby comes along and everyone's like, oh, the baby! The camera slowly pans left and there I am in a top hat and tails, juggling on a unicycle.
Yeah.
And I think I just translated, please look at me, please, I'm here too, to, oh, well, if you're busy with the baby, let me stand over here and impress these strangers.
Yeah.
And, that makes it sound like I was horribly unloved as a child, and that wasn't true either. But I think that there is some wiring that occurred at quite a young stage of, I have to do some showing off in order to feel like I'm still here.
And then to have that challenge by David at later life going, stop showing off, work, but still use a little bit of...
Yeah, but I suppose that's it. If you wanted to really be specific about that, there is some circuitry in my head, and bearing in mind all the brain is a circuit, so I mean that, not just, analogously. There is some circuit in my head that wants people to look at what I'm doing. What David Proudlock said was, there are 1,000 ways you can get that. So stop trying to use my way to get that thing you need, because my way is learning the lines and having the technique and taking it seriously and working really hard and respecting the other people on that stage and turning up on time and.
Yeah.
And so the question was, if you're going to stand up and show off in front of people, what do you want from that? And so the thing that we were talking about earlier, which is all of the things that we can quantify, we give importance. Oh, there were 200,000 of these. That must make it very important because there were only 100,000 of those. I think David's point, and I'm loosely translating this, was never a direct conversation we had, but certainly looking back how it felt was he was saying, there are thousands of ways you can show off and be the centre of attention. But what do you want the outcome of that to be? Do you want people to walk away going, wow, that guy's great? Or, why won't that prick ever shut up? Now, what I now know is that, people can feel both of those things at the same time. Or, in any audience, one person will say the first and one person will say the second. You're not in charge of how people respond to it, but what you are in charge of is how you feel about what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, to fast forward somewhat, if you are on a show like Celebrity Juice, not necessarily feeling like you're there for any great purpose, then you get to another stage where you're like, why am I here? Is this, people are looking at me, I'm on a show that people are watching and is well liked, but I'm not really doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm not really, I don't go home feeling good about what I do on that thing. And I'd rather, earn less money and it take more time to do something in the public perception as being less successful and go home with a big smile on my face and feel like I really excelled than earn more money for less time doing stuff that I don't really believe in or like.
This is the same conundrum I come up against, Rufus, where having various very, very wealthy, successful friends in TV and film, most of the ones that I'm closest to have a link to theatre. Plenty of them have never stepped on a stage in their life. And it is funny where they go, why do you do it? Like, it's just so much time.
Yeah.
Do you not just get bored? You say, well, how long does it take to rehearse? About 4 weeks and then a few months, pre-production. Really? And what kind of money do you get? Oh, this, which is not very much. Why? You go, well, because it's like forming a tribe. It's like it's in many ways. I attribute bringing a company together like bringing together a bit of a temporary family.
Yeah,
and the money is terrible, and that's a real shame. I wish the money was wonderful.
Yeah,
it's not. But the rewards are. I think the rewards are greater than finance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In answering the same question when I'm asked it, it's definitely that it's the real juice.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there are lots of things I love on television, and arguably the way in which we've connected most is talking about various science fiction shows that
and Muppets,
that we've loved the most.
Yeah.
So it's not to be snobbish about television, but real people in a space telling you a story that is delivered seamlessly. There's nothing like it. It's
nothing better.
It's like Five Guys versus, some little French restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I can eat a Five Guys and be like, oh my God, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever put in my mouth. Oh my God, that's so delicious.
We don't
Stop
even need to say anything.
And then I go to a little French restaurant and they bring out this steak that's been lovingly prepared, and they know the name of the cow and the guy that farmed it, and you put it in your mouth and go, oh, this is sublime.
This is of a different level.
This is something else. And for whatever reason, the way in which I attribute this thing having a quality, it's just of a higher quality than the other thing.
But then also, a lot of the TV shows that we've spoken about socially, a lot of those shows, you look back at the actors that are in them, and they're all great stage actors who happen to be on television where there's no rules. And there are things that are, nowadays, almost cringe-worthy because there's no science created yet. It's, all right, so I just act, shall I? Well, you keep filming and I'll keep doing what I'm doing. Hopefully the two will meet,
Yeah.
And you can see these great people like, Malcolm Tierney, for example, and Tom Baker, and, even Pernilla Scales, for example.
Yeah.
Who I saw the other day, funny enough, at a documentary about rep, saying how great it was. And gosh, she's married to Timothy West.
Tim West.
Tim West.
Sam West's parents.
Yeah. And just really, really interesting to see how passionate they were about rep, when they were, again, it's all coming back to your first soapbox, coming back to when we were young, and this was brilliant, this was exciting. Why is rep gone? Because it was rubbish, but it was great when you were doing it. All of the shows were half-baked, no one was cast right. It's a terrible thing, but when you were young and in a company of great people working, great.
Yeah, although, okay, so I'm going to stick up for rep. But
are you? I thought you would be the first to go. No.
I'm going to stick up for rep only on the grounds that I really came to this through stand-up,
Yeah.
right? So when you do stand-up, you get paid no money,
Yep.
and you go club to club to club to club to club. Can I have 5 minutes? Can I have 5 minutes? Can I have 5 minutes? On the phone, who are you? Never heard of you? No. Click.
Yeah.
Club to club to club. And you build over time. And you get these little 5 minutes, and then you get good enough that somebody offers you 10 minutes. And then you go, can I have 10 minutes? Can I have 10 minutes? And you build up and up and up and up and up. So that by the time, ideally, you're 5, 6 years down the line, you're regularly getting paid for doing 20-minute spots from, middle tier clubs. And because you've spent this 5 or 6 years getting paid reasonable money by middle tier clubs, now maybe you're breaking through and playing the best clubs. All of that journey is all to do with how good whether or not you are then any good as a stand-up comedian has everything to do with how much time you have actually spent on stage.
Definitely.
So when they talk about all the great actors coming through rep, the reason that they are great actors isn't that they were great actors who did rep. It was they went in as actors and rep forced them to become better actors because they had more stage time.
Definitely.
And, you're playing grandma this week and, the romantic lead next week.
And then you're ASM.
And then you're ASM. It's just, you're going to get that time. You're going to get that ability just to be on stage and feel like, oh, when I did this thing last time, it really worked. Let me try that again. Oh, maybe I do something else with it there. But it's just the ability to spend the time on stage showing off,
Just horrifies me, the amount of preparation in rehearsal room. It's actually quite an American way of doing it. For example, a lovely American friend of mine, I said, what's the difference, in your opinion? He's an American director. What's the difference between Britain and America? And he said, look, in Britain, you guys train to rehearse. In America, we train to audition. And you kind of go, shit, that makes perfect sense.
Market economy.
Yeah.
Sell.
So you get these actors who come and do these amazing auditions, and then you go, that's really good. Can you just try maybe playing that with a bit of remorse? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
And you go, oh, fuck. Whereas over here, you have all the angst of, I just can't audition.
Yeah.
Yet the creative potential, you want me to play Hamlet? Fine, let's go. I'm ready for this. Yeah. And again, it's just these different priorities. Last question I'll ask before we get into later life. When you were, you didn't go to drama school, like you said. You worked very much on the road. What advice and what experiences did you have learning your craft without that lovely, great, big, shiny drama school that everyone goes to and comes out as if they're the kids from Fame? What was your experiences learning on the road?
To an extent, there are now so many bloody podcasts and, documentaries and all of those things. Like, just watch any one of the flipping hundreds of TV shows that are about being a stand-up comedian, right? And that was largely it. Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee is Jerry Seinfeld talking to other comedians, in which what you discover, which is true, is that comedians see themselves as a slightly separate breed of people who had no real choice but to be stand-up comedians who find each other and go, oh, right, I'm part of a tribe of people who feel that they're on the outside looking in all the time and want to use that position to then step in front of all of those people going, and what about this thing? And have the affirmation of the group without ever really feeling that they are part of that group. So I learned that. I learned that spending time with those people was probably the thing that I loved most about that job. And I also learned that the more successful you get, the less of that there is. Because once you're touring around under your own name, it's really just you might have a support act, but you're not hanging out in the dressing room ever because, one of you's on and the other one's waiting. So the bit that I loved most, and I think genuinely the thing I was best at was I compared. So I would, go on, do the first, cold open, 10, 15 minutes. I was really good at that.
Yeah.
And then, back after the interval, another little 10 minutes. Back after the third interval, 5 minutes. And then the rest of the time in the dressing room with 2 other acts, just enjoying the company of incredibly funny and smart people.
Yeah.
So that's really what I loved, was how much I loved comedians. For a professional level, what I learned was how to be in a room and to be speaking and listening at the same time. And that is the thing above and beyond everything else that I realised in working with actors was a skill I had that it felt to me, and does sort of feel to me, a lot of actors don't actually have. That you focus so much on what you're doing and projecting it out that you forget to listen to them as to whether or not it's landed. You know,
Yeah.
it's why are you talking? They're laughing.
Yeah.
You know, and when
Craft.
I did Joe
Craft.
Orton, craft. But it is the listening to the room. It's being totally in the moment and totally acting on stage with somebody else, whilst at the same time being fully conscious of what the people watching you are thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
And how to listen. You know, it's not just a case of, well, what are you on about? I didn't have my finger in my ear or anything. Of course I was listening to them. It's like, yeah, but what are you hearing?
Yeah.
You know, you've got to train yourself to hear whether that gasp was the gasp of surprise, shock, amazement, displeasure, or the absence of a gasp was itself a gasp in its own right because what preceded it was, you know, there's a million ways that the audience are going to respond. And if you're doing your job as a stand-up or as a clown, you know, you're going to be in charge of their breathing. They're going to be breathing with you, so that, you know, that whole thing about comedy timing is that as they breathe with you and you interrupt that breath, you know, there's a wave and you're in that wave.
Well, Rufus, we are all alone in your lovely hotel room.
Where's this going?
I guess no one's going to mind if I get my tips out. That's right, here are my top theatrical tips of things to see this February 2018. There or Here at the Park Theatre. What happens when life is outsourced? A new dramatic comedy about relationships, race, belonging, and outsourcing. Don't miss this UK premiere of There or Here from the producers of the 2013 hit Yellowface. When illness prevents Robin and AJ from having a child of their own, they return to India, the country of AJ's birth, to outsource their pregnancy to a local woman. As they come together to face this next step in their lives, they are unable to be the comfort that each other needs. Through sharp writing and witty observation, There or Here explores what happens when couples forego face-to-face communication in favour of the virtual. Solace is found through strangers on phone sex lines, in IT call centres and at drive-thrus. Age and location no longer matter as the world moves online and life becomes outsourced. There or Here plays at the Park Theatre in their Park 90 space from the 23rd of January to the 17th of February 2018. For more information and to book tickets, visit www.parktheatre.co.uk. Eugenius at the Other Palace. Eugenius, the most eagerly anticipated new musical for years, is coming to London in January 2018 with a strictly limited run at the Other Palace. Through underground word of mouth and a very public concert performance selling out at the London Palladium, Eugenius is fast becoming a cult phenomenon. The show is a teenage love story set against a backdrop of comic books and superheroes. The story is about a teenager whose dreams provide him with the inspiration for a Hollywood blockbuster. Eugenius boasts a totally original score, Ben Adams' homage to all the great sounds of the 80s, plus a scintillating script that makes you laugh, cry, and punch the air shouting #GoEugenius. This is a show where the geeks rule, dreams come true, and everyone finds the superhero inside themselves. You've just got to know where to look. Plays at the Other Palace from the 22nd of January until the 3rd of March 2018. For more information and to book tickets, visit www.theotherpalace.com.
Hi, I'm Alex from Theatre Counts. We're a friendly team of accountants who work with clients in the entertainment industry, and it's our mission to make tax simple. We offer a no jargon, simple approach with no hidden fees. Here's my tax tip of the week. One of our most frequently asked questions is, how much of my rent can I include on my tax return? This is a tricky question, and we've seen some very high claims in the past, even from other accountants. HMRC advised that you can claim a reasonable proportion of your rent as an expense on your tax return, and they have strict guidelines for you to follow. As an example, just because you have a 2-bedroom flat and use one of them for work, it doesn't mean you can claim for 50% of your rent as an expense. We've written a blog to help with this further, and we'll pin it to our Twitter page for you to read more. We are proud and privileged to be the first sponsors of the Show People podcast, which we love to listen to. If you'd like a free chat with us or to join us as a client, you can contact us via our website, which is www.theatrecounts.co.uk, or you can find us on Twitter @theatrecounts. If you're a new client to us, we will even give you a £50 discount off your first year's fee. Just quote the Show People podcast. P.S. It's almost the end of January. Yippee!
I know it's only a few days away from that deadly tax deadline, but even now, get in touch and they can still save you money at this stage. So, Rufus, what were your earliest jobs in the theatre? What were the first things that you did?
I know this sounds daft, but I still really feel like my first jobs in theatre were the plays that I did at school.
Doesn't sound daft.
And we did A Midsummer Night's Dream, and David Proudlock directed it. And my school had a courtyard, which makes it sound very grand. And let's be honest, it probably was rather grand. But we did it outside. And as the play started, we did it outside in summer. So everybody sits down in this courtyard, and the sun is still up. It's still daytime. And by the time the play finishes, it's pitch black. And it kind of tracks perfectly with what happens in the show. And we were just a really fantastic schools production of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Who were you? Puck.
Puck, yeah.
You were Puck, of course.
And even now, can remember If We Shadows Have Offended and all of that. So,
slightly different voice, I imagine, at that point.
If We Shadows Have Offended. And what else did we do? We did a school panto, and we did Sweeney Todd and Oh What a Lovely War.
Oh, yeah.
So some great plays, plays that I now realise absolutely have their part in the canon of Great British Theatre. But I do feel, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, that though that was where I really learned what it was to stand on stage and face the right way and how to engage a room full of people in a story. And then I did stand up and, did various kind of improv-y things and whatever. And that was all very good training. Between improv and comparing, where you've just got to make stuff up off the top of your head, that rewiring your brain to be able to make jokes in real time was very useful. And then really what happened was stand-up had got me to the point where I was getting TV work. TV work then meant that I was billed as a comedian that was actually more successful than I really was as a comedian. Certainly, I hadn't really done Edinburgh. I hadn't, toured or anything like that. I was just very happy being a guy who went to comedy clubs and this is great. I get paid. They normally give me free beer at the bar. This is all going very well. But because people have seen you on TV, they're like, so when's the tour happening? You're like, that would require me having 90 minutes of material. I don't have that. I just make stuff up. So by the time I was on Celebrity Juice, that sort of ended up not really being as fun as it had been for various reasons. And I left that under something of a cloud. And my agent had recently employed a fella who had worked for a theatrical agent. My agent really didn't do theatre particularly. She did, but people would come to her and ask for her acts rather than her being out there, shaking hands and making friends and whatever. Mm-hmm. But this young guy that she had coming into her agency, he'd worked for a theatrical agent. So when I was on the phone to him, I went, just don't know what I'm going to do, really. And he went, what about theatre? I went, well, obviously that'd be amazing. I'd made a movie. And the director of the movie said to me, you're really good at this, but you won't get a chance to show people that you're good at this for as long as you're doing all the panel shows and things.
Yeah.
And I sort of really took that to heart. So then when Juice went sour, I was like, I'd really love to do more acting, but I just don't know that anybody's going to take that seriously. And I can understand why they might not, to be perfectly honest. And then he said, well, let me see what's out there. I've got a few contacts. And within a week or so, Steve Marmion at the Soho Theatre said, I've got this really bizarre piece of political theatre that I would really love you to do. And it pays, £3 a week. And, there's a chip in for the tea of £3.50 a week. So, and yeah, it's going to be a very odd piece. It's not written yet, but we start in 3 weeks. And it's basically an amalgam of 19 different writers sharing their visions of utopia. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up what they write, and then we're going to basically throw it in the air, and where all the bits land, we're then going to make that our show, and everyone's going to play a clown. And, and I'm hearing him talk, and I'm thinking, right, okay, when do I say to him, you're talking shit, mate? And, because on the one hand, it sounds fun, but on the other hand, this is obviously a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And he said, so he told me about the play, and it sounded like a terrible idea. And then he said, because the thing is, what there just hasn't been in this country properly for a long time is genuinely the theatre of the politics of ideas. And we are sold these utopian visions, but none of these people are talking about what a utopia actually is. And so he started there, and then he brought in John Godber and Willie Russell and how all these guys had, previously been able to do political theatre with a small p, but they'd had a big impact on people. And I'm like, oh, you motherfucker.
Yeah.
You absolute shitbag.
Yeah.
You've put me in a place where I now have to decide. I have to look my own 14-year-old self in the eye and go, all those dreams you had about what matters in the world, and that you swore blind to yourself night after night you'd never turn your back, and all of those things. Well, today's the day you decide, are you this post-success, white, overweight, middle-class man who, has rejected all of that, or are you still the person who was trying to be better than all those other pricks?
Yeah.
And by the time he'd got to his little explanation about, how he was going to do it, and it was new writers, and we'd start in Newcastle, and there was no money in it, wherever, I was like, lovely, so when do we start?
Yeah. And what did you get out of it? What did you get at the end?
So much. What did I get out of it? I got a mate. I mean, Steve and I are pals.
Yeah.
The play itself was terrible. There's no denying that. It got certainly my favourite line from a review ever.
Go on.
Which was, it basically over 6 paragraphs slated this play about just how ill-conceived, terrible, everything about it was. And it said, so it had mentioned everyone, but it hadn't mentioned any of the people in it. So, obviously I'm keeping reading because I don't know where's this going to go. And just there was one line, the last line of this whole thing, it said, however, the cast seem like nice people who are probably very kind to their mothers, and I see no need to mention them by name here.
Can you remember the critic? Who was it?
No, I can't, not off the top of my head.
Oh, the world needs more critics like that.
Yeah.
This is West End producer, and you're listening to the Show People podcast with the sumptuous, the savoury, and the slightly sugary Andrew Keates, dear.
What was the first big job that you got that you thought, geez, okay, how am I going to do that? Would that be One Man, Two Guvnors, do you think?
Yeah, and that came literally, we finished Utopia under sad circumstances, actually. We were a cast of 6, and on the penultimate Saturday, one of our number had a stroke.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But there was, that immediate first flurry of phone calls of like, well, can you learn those lines? And if we gender flip that, then you could... And then sort of within 24 hours, like, no. It's, if I think it was partly out of respect for the actor, but also if the play had been reviewed as like, oh my God, you've got to see this thing, I think we would have all felt more given to, well, let's make it work under any circumstances. Let's Muppet Show this. And as it was, people were like, maybe,
let's let her die.
Maybe,
let her die. Let her go.
It's insured. It'll, put a claim in. Nobody could have predicted that. So during Utopia, the National, they'd had the success with Corden. It had already gone to Broadway, and I think had finished on Broadway. They were still running it at the Haymarket, and had booked a national tour for when it ended at the Haymarket, knowing that the moment James Corden wasn't in it, obviously it wouldn't sell any tickets, except for the fact that it still was selling incredibly well at the Haymarket, and the Haymarket had no interest in it coming off. But the National had already booked all these venues for a tour, so they trained another company to be able to do that show on tour and then take it to Australia. And I said to them, this could work out really well because I can't do the Australian bit, but whoever's doing it in London can go to Australia and I'll just swap. And they went, that's not really how this works. You don't just offer yourself a West End contract. Well, I was just thinking ahead, like trying to help out. And they're like, no.
Thanks, Rufus.
You go off on the tour and we'll see. But actually what happened was they came to see the dress rehearsal before we set out on the tour. And then 3 hours later, they got a phone call saying, so they would like you to go and take over in the West End. And yeah, I don't think I never enjoyed the show as much as when we were doing it on tour. There was definitely something about being part of that gang and part of that family that was
tribe,
delicious.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. And they were a great... We were a great band of folk. It was a very strong time to be alive. Just because we were smashing the show to bit. I mean, that show is so joyful anyway and is delivered with a sort of 60s charm. So the idea that you'd be up in, find a pub, be up till 3 o'clock in the morning, sleep it off the next day and roll in and, 3 strong coffees later be like, right, are we going again? Let's go again! It was the right kind of show to have that vibe to it, It was really fun.
And the energy you must have had to
my
deliver.
God, it killed me. I mean, that was the thing. I did a year, no disrespect to the august National Theatre, but technically it was 2 contracts that I had.
Yeah.
I had a 5-month contract to do it on tour and then a 7-month contract to do it in the West End. And really, for doing the same show, if that had been a year's contract, I'd have been entitled to 28 days off.
Yeah.
As it was, I was entitled to 2 days off in a year.
You're joking.
Doing that part. Which some people have referred to as being harder than Hamlet.
Yeah. A damn sight more fun. And more technical. Damn sight more technical.
Well, I mean, that's for other people to say. All I mean is the idea of only having 2 days off over a year
is insane.
Was too much.
How did you keep up? I mean, did you
Well,
change
I didn't.
your diet?
My wife... no, I didn't diet. I just ate like a twat,
Five Guys.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, just ate and drank and just soldiered on.
When you finished One Man, Two Guys, I mean, that's a year of hard graft. I mean, you must have lost shitloads of weight.
You'd have thought, wouldn't you? But the truth was, I just ate like a moron, and didn't really take care of myself, and actually, was fairly unhappy throughout all of that time because my wife was incredibly unhappy. We had a new baby, and she was doing everything because I basically said, I can't get in at 11:30 from doing the show and get up at 7:30. When I get in, I can't just go straight to bed because I'm still wired.
Yeah.
And then get up at 7:30 and get family life happening. So basically, I was sleeping in every day. She was doing everything with a new baby, and just very cross that her life had led her to this point. Completely understandably so, frankly.
Yeah.
So on the back of that, we weren't in particularly good shape. And because we weren't in good shape, I immediately took another job at the end of that, which was rehearsing in town during the day, doing the show that night, and then, and then off to Chichester for the best part of 6 weeks, immediately afterwards. By the end of which, we were basically at the point of, like, let's not be married anymore.
Wow.
And then remembered we had children, and we're like, right, well, let's stay married, but let's stay married with a plan for how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And, we've been married 11 years and we've definitely been close to that again and then less close to that. I say this as a man who at the moment, couldn't feel that less if he tried. We're in a very good place, me and my missus, but, it takes its toll.
Theatre is a very strict mistress, especially if you have to do, touring. That's extraordinary. And actually probably what a testament probably to your relationship, because I can think of some marriages where, I'm going to go on tour for 3 months and it ends. Because it's just, I can't function without you, therefore. Whereas to have that language.
Oh, no, it's, and a lot of that's about it's just accepting how we're wired up. When you feel the sense of belonging, the overwhelming sense of belonging you feel when you're part of a touring company.
Definitely.
You're like, well, this is my family. What do you mean there are these other people? No, I live with these people now.
And what's lovely as well is it's just that beautiful thing, and this is where, I'm sure a therapist would be more interested in this, but it's that lovely thing of I get to meet you all fresh for the first time, and none of you know my shit, and you get to see me as I am now. And you know what? I'm the lead as well.
Yeah.
Aren't I great?
Yeah. I don't have to disappoint any of you sexually.
Yeah. and of course I've got to ask, because it's not an obvious transition, but to go from stand-up comedy to quite serious political plays, one man, two Guvnors, as I've always said, the National Theatre's, most successful pantomime. What? I'm winding you up. I knew I'd piss you off. What would...
Letting it go.
He's going to let it go. What was it that led you to musical theatre? And indeed, what I think is some of the best musicals that have ever been written, especially Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, opposite Robert Lindsay. What was...
Mate, listen, it's this straightforward. They asked.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it really is. It wasn't, it wasn't a plan I had. It wasn't something where I said, I'd really love to go and do musical theatre next. I'd been raised, on Les Mis and, lots of Disney musicals and things like that, and all of the MGM movies, but didn't really go to lots of musical theatre. But, in doing the TV that I'd done and whatever, I'd met people who had done great shows and, talked to them about what they'd done. It always sounded, very exciting and enthralling, but it's, I don't know, musical theatre, it just feels like such a specific thing that the idea that, I'll go and do that next. Is like, no, you won't.
It's like when you hear, it's like when you hear people not in the business. I do love it when I'm with a friend and they go, do you know what you should do? You should go on that EastEnders. And you just see an actor go, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. I'll try.
Sage advice.
Thanks, Nan.
Yeah.
What about Les Mis? You'd be lovely in Les Mis. You've always had a good voice.
Well, that was the other side of it. To be perfectly honest, I definitely had that sense for 10 years of living in and around London. Every 3 months, a new lot of posters go up, like, who's in Chicago now?
Darius.
Yeah.
Yay.
It's not for me to pass any judgment on his ability. All I mean is, I definitely got the sense that there were parts for people who couldn't really do it, but whose celebrity was valuable enough that they were given a part outside of whether or not they would actually be any good in that part.
That's true, but I don't think that applies to you. And I know you can't say that because you are Rufus, but you have clearly, in all the musicals you've done, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Wind in the Willows, ones that I've seen, literally take to it like, like a duck to water. You don't look out of place. You don't go, oh, God, it's like when they put Caprice in Rent. Just to be clear, listeners, Rufus Hound is nothing like Caprice in real life. They're very similar facial hair. But it suits you. It really suits you. And you never watch the show and go, oh, it would be better if, Charlie Stemp did it. It would be different if Charlie Stemp did it. But I'm not unhappy seeing you.
No, look, and I hope that's the case. But, if you ask me what got me into it, the honest answer is they asked. So I turned up at the audition. I said, I don't know how to do this. So you've got to teach me how to do it, and then I'll do it. But it starts with you teaching me how to do it. And certainly in the lead up to Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, it was just a lot of like, no, you sing like this. No, this is how you get to that point, or this is how you move in that way. And, got there. Just worked very hard. Back to David Proudlock. This is work. Having done Scoundrels, by the time Willows rolled around, I was like, I don't know how to do this encyclopedically, but I know what I did on the last thing, and I know what some of that would work on this, and then it's just a case of, being vulnerable enough to say to people, I don't really know how to do this bit. What words do you have for me to, to steer that? And sometimes that's about the other actors you're working with. Undoubtedly on Scoundrels, Kat Kingsley was, my lifeboat throughout all of that. She couldn't have been kinder or more generous. And, you know, we did Willows on tour and that all went very well. But working with Frafi and Neil McDermott and, you know, Tom Howes played Ratty at that time. And then when we did it in town, you know, just standing next to Simon Lipkin, you know, who I think... I just don't know why Simon Lipkin isn't a household name. He's so funny and so good and certainly live, just so magnetic.
Yeah.
You know, anyway.
I'll never forget seeing him years ago when he was just out of drama school? When he did Avenue Q.
Oh, yeah.
And you just looked at him, and Simon won't mind me saying this. He's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
But he is a stunning guy when he's on stage. I'm not talking about appearance.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He just radiates this, I am the funnest, coolest guy in the world, and I'm quirky. I just remember going, who is this guy? This guy's going to do amazing things.
So he definitely brought some of that to rap.
Yeah.
But I saw him recently in Nativity at the Hammersmith Apollo.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Oh, my days.
Daniel
Honestly,
did it as well, didn't he? Daniel Boyes, yeah.
Danny Boyes. But Simon, you know, look, no disrespect to any of the people involved in that show. The kids were all brilliant, the other grown-up members of the cast. But, you know, it is no overestimation to say that is the Simon Lipkin show.
Yeah.
It's built that way. He sits and does a monologue at the top of the show and then, you know, fills in all the other bits. It's him telling you about all this stuff and then is in the scenes and the sketches and being very funny and given license to improvise and all that. Like, it's him. And, you know, they've already announced they're going to bring that back for next Christmas because that's how great it was. And it's on him to make that work and be as good as he was in that show. So... yeah, but I knew him not from anything before winning the Willows, but from having seen Assassins at the Menier.
Ah, yeah, well, he was extraordinary. Him and Dave Roberts, everybody in that production, everybody.
Oh, yeah, Andy Nyman.
Yeah.
So I knew him as this, like, really tortured, serious, right, Sondheimian performer, you know, and then, oh, right, you're also, you know, Johnny Clownshoes.
Hello, this is Steve First, and you are listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates. A man so marvellous, he's putting bums on seats. Whether it be parakeets eating halal meats or premier athletes submitting VAT receipts. It's the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates.
It's time for the Show People platform, the part of the show where we offer the chance to any playwright, composer or artist the chance to share their work with our listeners. And today's platform is given to Rob Winlow. Rob is an award-winning composer who wrote his first musical at just 16, and his work has been performed at the Edinburgh Fringe, the Jane Austen Festival and numerous theatres around the UK. He co-founded the York New Musical Festival, a platform for new work in musical theatre, and he produces When Forced. His latest work is Austen the Musical, which explores Jane Austen's struggle to have her work published in a male-dominated environment, her romances, and her vow to reject a woman's lifestyle in Georgian England. It is the story of Jane Austen's transition from a country parson's daughter to one of the most read writers in English literature. The songs in Austen the Musical have moments of joy, despair, and heart-wrenching sadness. It's currently on its nationwide tour, playing to sell-out audiences until March 2018. We're going to hear a song from the show, which is performed by Annie Kochman, Emily Hales, Oliver J. Brooke, and Rob Winlow, which is from the original production. The song we're about to hear is sung just before the Christmas ball, when Jane is delighted at the prospect of meeting Tom Lefroy once more, following his declaration of having serious intentions. Here's The Snow Outside from Austen the Musical by Rob Winlow.
See the snow outside, see the snow outside tonight, see the snow, see the snow outside tonight, keeping warm by the cozy fire, run through the hall, watching it fall. See the snow outside, see the snow outside tonight, see the snow, see the snow outside tonight.
For more information about Austin the Musical, please just visit www.austinthemusical.co.uk and find out where the show is touring in the UK. Are you a writer, composer or artist who creates original work? Well, the Show People podcast wants to hear from you. Please send us some recordings, along with full permission to use on the show, along with information about yourself and your work to info@arian-productions.com, as we're passionate about supporting new work and sharing it with our loyal listeners.
Hello, my dears. You have the ineffable and probably undeserved pleasure of listening to the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates. This is Stephen Fry wishing you a wonderful listen. Thank you.
I want you to imagine that I have stranded you on tour in rather peculiar digs in Whitley Bay. In your room, you already have a copy of the complete works of Shakespeare and the Bible.
Yeah.
I want to know what you would need to survive, starting with the album.
I mean, there's a million ways of answering this, but just to say an album that I really love, I'm going to go with Ben Folds and Why Music in Concert.
Right, I don't know it.
So Ben Folds from Ben Folds 5 is viewed as being one of those guys that was sort of a pop artist, sort of an indie artist, but musically really knew his stuff. And he fell in with this group, Why Music, who are a 6-piece chamber orchestra.
Amazing.
Yeah, and because he's a proper music guy, had become quite interested in modern classical music. And the woman that runs this Why Music group does a podcast called Meet the Composer about modern classical music. And so they collaborated on some new material and some of Ben's old material, but kind of reversioned using this 6-piece chamber orchestra.
You're going to have to text me a link to remember to look at that. What would be the film?
How do you answer these questions? Because, you know, on the one hand, I've always held that the best movie ever made was Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the perfect movie. You know, it's got a moral of the story. It's got these amazing actors giving great performances. The first time it was sort of out and released, it was the first time that CG had really kind of looked like the thing rather than a computerized thing. It's Spielberg. It's those kids' great performances. It's that huge score. It's like the perfect Hollywood movie.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, oh, well, I mean, yeah.
Life finds a way.
Samuel L. Jackson, Richard Attenborough. I mean, it's Sam Neill, Lord Dern. It's a great cast. And it's
got dinosaurs in it.
Yeah, and more than any of that, there's a T-Rex and there are raptors, and it's amazing. Pete Postlethwaite. I mean,
that's cool. Like I defy anything.
But then you've got Tarantino. And for my generation, Pulp Fiction, it was like, oh, you've wholly reinvented cinema as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Then you've got like The Fifth Element, which is as perfect a piece of sci-fi as I think I've ever watched and seen and been enthralled by and pleased by. So it's like, which clever thing do I want to say is the one movie I can't live without? And what clever basis for saying, why it's perfect or why it's the best should you have? And then I basically can wind my way through all of that list and then just come back to probably Anchorman.
Now, I know you buy a lot of books, but what would be the book?
Oh, I have to think of one I'd actually read. Well, I mean, depending on how long I was away for, I just bought Alan Moore's Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah.
So if I was going to be away for a while, I might eventually wade through it. As it is, I've read the first page and thought, oh well, I'll save that from when I've got a spare 6 months. But if it was I could reread one book, what would it be? Probably Garth Ennis's Preacher comics.
That's cool. Yeah, but that would be cool to have.
Yeah, it would be cool. I mean, look, they are fantastic. I love those things. I know that my life has been largely informed by reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. So, that's a strong contender as well. If it was a novel, it would just be Carter Beats the Devil by Glenn David Gould. There's a 1,000 pieces of sci-fi, and what did I just read? I say just read. Read last year, like somebody was going to take it away from me, was The Crimson Petal and the White.
I don't know it. Who's it by?
Oh, my days. They made a TV mini-series out of it, which I totally missed. And the TV adaptation seems very good, but the actual writing, it's by Michael Faber, who wrote The Book of Strange New Things as well.
That I do know. Yeah.
And yeah, The Book of Strange New Things is fantastic and well worth reading.
Yeah.
And sort of the type of science fiction that I try and make people who say they don't like science fiction read.
Yeah.
Because it really isn't science fiction.
It's dystopia almost.
It's just, yeah, well, this is it. It's about, we don't quite know the human timeline in which it's set. Technology has certainly moved on a pace, but in terms of how that technology has impacted people on Earth is very little. But all it really allows the lead character to do is leave Earth and go to a far-flung planet where they found other life.
Yeah.
And he, as a vicar, has been requested to go and talk to the aliens on this other planet. It couldn't be more about what makes us human if it tried.
Yeah.
You know, it is more about humanity than it is about any other thing.
Well,
and so people who say they don't like science fiction, it's like, you just have to go, yeah. Man goes on journey, meets strangers. You know, if this was written in 1800s, it would be about, he went off to, see the pygmies in Africa. It doesn't, you just take one word out and put another word in.
It's almost like by changing the context, you can talk about broader issues like, I don't know, William Shakespeare might have done.
Yeah.
In Fair Verona. Has nothing to do with Verona, guys.
Yeah.
Really doesn't have anything to do with Fair Verona.
Somewhere else. Yeah.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
And
on this magical island.
Where we meet these blue people that are the same as us and are really kind and lovely.
Yeah.
Not that we're trying to force a point or anything.
No.
And what would be the play?
Yeah, weird to give the answer Jerusalem twice, isn't it?
No, but good.
Jerusalem by Alan Moore and then Jerusalem by Jez Butterworth. But yeah, man, I got tickets to see that, and sat in the stalls, fourth row back or whatever, and
change your life.
I was like,
how do you do that, right?
This could be how theatre works.
Yeah,
gotcha. Okay,
I won't ruin the ending, but that ending will stay with me for the rest of my entire life, and I've never witnessed anything like that before.
No,
and it's annoying really, because I heard so many stories about Mark Rylance, and you kind of go, oh God, what an ego, and then you see the work and you go, do you know what? If you can do that, I think we just tolerate that, don't we?
Yeah, that's it.
Like, if that's what you need, if you need to welcome the ghosts of the globe, know, and make a offering of fruit that sits there and decays over 8 weeks, do that, because if you can do that ending of Jerusalem, you can do anything.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny inside and outside, right?
Yeah.
From the outside looking in, I don't give a shit what you have to do. You have to punch the stage manager on the way to the stage to deliver that performance? Do it. I don't give a shit.
Just to be clear, the Show People podcast does not condone punching your stage manager if you are listening to the experience of Rufus Hound.
But you know what I mean? From the outside in, as an audience member, you're like, please me.
Yeah.
I paid my ticket. I don't give it, just be amazing. I don't care about anything else. And then from the inside out, you're like, the stage manager is my best friend, and every night that absolute arsehole punches him, and he thinks just because he can show off a bit, that justifies that kind of horrific violence. How dare he? And how dare this baying mob of sycophantic idiots
adore them, sir.
Clap him at the end. If they knew what we have to suffer for this bullshit, they can all fuck off.
Yeah. And what would be the musical? Of course?
That would be. I'm gonna let Book of Mormon just nudge it.
Okay.
Simply because it only just nudges it over Groundhog Day. They are totally different shows in so much as one is not afraid to punch you repeatedly in the face because it's so good that it knows it can get away with it. And Groundhog Day doesn't do that. Groundhog Day doesn't punch you in the face. It tells you all of the ways in which people can feel punched in the face, but it doesn't set out to punch you specifically, whereas Book of Mormon definitely does.
That song, Seeing You for the First Time, I defy anybody with a heart that's ever been in love not to go, how do you write that? Tim Minchin is a wizard.
Yeah.
He is Witchetty is not of this world.
Yeah,
How
I
he
listened
does it.
to the when they released the Broadway soundtrack of Groundhog Day. I listened to that pretty much on a loop for
I did.
6 weeks, I think.
Just crying and feeling nonchalant and feeling uplifted and then dropped again and fallible and, it's okay to be quirky, but God, I know what you mean. It's an amazing piece.
And there is no town greater than Punxsutawney. Yeah.
And I mean, and I love the casting. When I saw it in London, I love the casting. I like that I looked at a stage full of real people.
Yeah.
Different ages, brilliant mates, like Leo Andrew was in it, for example, who's an older gentleman, shall we put it that way?
Yeah.
Compared to kids straight out of drama school. And they went, we need all of you.
Yeah. Because it's a town.
Right. But again, lots of musicals have a town, and you see lots of 6 foot, 6-packed young homosexuals all dancing beautifully, and we're in this town.
Yeah.
I loved what they created there.
Where is it, and how do I move there?
And what would be your luxury item?
I'd say my shave horse.
What the fuck is a shave horse?
Shave horse is a bench that you sit on with one leg either side, and you use your feet to press a clamping arm, and so you press with there's a kind of pivoting section. So you sit one side up, you sit on this bench, a leg either side, you push your feet forward, a clamping arm comes down onto a bench right in front of you, and you place pieces of wood in that clamp and use various tools to shave wood into the shape that you need it in order to make greenwood furniture.
I was impressed when I first met you and I said, what have you been up to? And you said quite candidly, I've been making some chairs. And I went, what? And actually, and again, because you can't necessarily say this, the work you've done is really amazing. Like beautifully crafted chairs.
Say more things like that, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, funny enough, I want to make some breakfast bar stools, and the guy that teaches me how to make all of these things.
Yeah.
They closed down over the winter, so I'm thinking, actually, round about now is probably the time to email him, going, so
can we have another session?
What have you got coming up? Can I come and stay with you for
6 months?
Week? And well, honestly, mate,
and just build a log cabin.
If I thought I could just move there, I think I probably would. But other considerations.
Family shows.
Oh, those idiots.
So, it's now time for everyone's, and I do mean everyone's, favourite part of the show. Rufus Hound, you must answer all the questions I'm about to ask you as quickly as possible within 5 minutes. You are only allowed 3 passes.
Okay.
So use them wisely, because you have no idea what I may ask you. Rufus Hound, let's play Funny 5 Minutes. Rufus Hound, what is the worst note you've ever been given from a director?
It doesn't matter, it's a musical.
What is your worst habit?
Timekeeping.
What happened in the last dream you had?
I think I was employed.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
What is the strangest place you've ever had a wee?
Out of a window with 1 foot in a urinal.
Do you have a favourite sport?
Yes.
What is it?
Roller derby.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
I thought we were friends. If you're an animal, what would it be?
A tapir.
Who is the most famous person you've ever met?
Beyonce.
Really?
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Sweet or savoury?
Sweet.
If you had to have your last meal, what would it be?
Five Guys, probably.
Have you ever been abducted by aliens?
Not to my knowledge, but then maybe that's just what they want me to think.
Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
100 duck-sized horses.
Why is that?
Because they're tiny. You just keep kicking.
Yeah, but that's well, you have done one man, two governors. If
If
you can do a year of one man, two governors, you can deal with
kick 100 duck-sized horses. Yeah.
If you had to jump into a swimming pool filled with something, what would it be?
Don't give that answer.
This is the question that stumped you.
Yeah. Moisturiser. I was just thinking about what would actually feel nicest.
I mean, water. We're still just fine.
Like, you can go to swim if you like. This is your one chance to swim in something like unusual.
Yeah.
That would, like, what would actually be nicest?
Moisturiser.
Right?
Potentially fatal, but you know.
Yeah.
Are you an early riser or a night owl?
Night owl.
Do you have a teddy bear?
No. Although I have just bought one on eBay.
Spooky.
My son is really into this podcast. It's called Moosecraft, and so he's got this weird moose obsession. And while we were on holiday, we were talking about my teddy bear growing up was Montgomery Moose from the Getaway Gang.
Oh,
Nobody remembers the Getaway Gang, but I looked and there was somebody selling one on eBay, so I bought my old teddy bear back off eBay.
That's really adorable. You're like the best dad. What is the best kids show ever?
Oh, stop the podcast. There's a weight of responsibility in answering this. The Muppet Show.
Deal. If you ordered a pizza, what would you order?
Mushrooms, plenty of oregano.
Daddy or chips?
Chips.
Sondheim or Lloyd Webber?
Sondheim.
Yeah. What is the meaning of life?
There is no meaning in life, but the point of life is to find meaning.
Oh, very good. Well, Rufus Hound, I'm very sad to say that sound tells me that is the end of the show. No,
Why do we have to stop speaking to each other?
All I can say is thank you to Rob Winlow and all those involved in Austin the Musical for sharing their work with us. Congratulations to everyone who made my theatrical tips. And most importantly, please go ballistic for the extraordinary Mr. Rufus Hound.
5 out of 10 in the end, 5 out of 10. I didn't like him. He seemed a bit much. He couldn't just stick to answering one question. It took too long.
Rufus, how can people keep up to date with all that you're up to?
Look to the sky, and if there is a lone dove flying in front of a fluffy cloud, that means that the firstborn has risen.
Yes. And on Twitter?
At Rufus Hound.
And a website?
Nope.
No. 290s.
290s, man. get with 2015, Grandad.
Yeah, Insta. I've actually tried doing Instagram. I wish I was prettier. Anyway, I'm getting to talk myself away. And anyway, it's 2018, you loon. This podcast is produced by Arian Productions Limited, dedicated to giving opportunities to theatre makers. If you can support the work we do, please become a friend of Arian by making a donation to help fund this free podcast, as well as more shows, masterclasses, and a load of other plans we've got in 2018. Just visit arianproductions.com/donate. Go on, please do it after the podcast. It'll make a big difference. A big thank you to Drew Baxter, Bethany McKay, and Nicola Rivers, who have all made a donation. And of course, thank you to our loyal sponsors, Theatre Counts. Check out their details, and you can save 50 quid off your first year's fees just by quoting Show People. If you have any comments, ideas, things you want to send into the show, you can reach me on Twitter at Andrew Keates. You can send me an email to info@arian-productions.com, or like the Show People page on Facebook at facebook.com/showpeoplepodcast. There you can join fellow listeners and take part in the forum and talk about all things mentioned on the show. Our next episode is out on the 12th of February. Until next time, look after yourself, show peeps, and remember, just be better. do get in touch with Alex and the team at Theatre Count to see how they can save you money. And don't forget to say the Show People podcast, where you can... Jesus. Well, it's been a while since I felt that at the back of the throat.
Oh my God. Guys, stop what you're doing. Keates's not at his wings.